again. I'm so happy to have you here today. We met earlier this year, I want to say early this year in Miami over a Purposeful Intent event. And I was so impressed, not just about, the professional experience that you shared, but a lot of the personal aspects and the vulnerability and honesty that you brought to the conversation I thought was so special and unique. So I was really glad to have a chance to connect with you. And I'm excited to hear some of the questions that I have and share some of your perspective and who you are with my audience. So I'd love for you to begin with just a brief introduction of who you are and how you got started in your career, and we'll take it from there.
Okay, well, it's been a long and winding road, let's put it that way. But thank you so much. I'm thrilled to have this time with you and to be able to connect. Let's see, I started my career in real estate. My dad was an architect. My grandfather was an architect. I've always loved real estate. And so I went to the hotel school at Cornell University. I wanted to build hotels. And when I graduated, no one was building anything, horrible economy. I had to learn how to support myself. I went into real estate valuations and really got into the analysis of real estate and what creates value in real estate. And at that point, it was really the numbers. It was income, it was expense, it was investment value and return on the investment that you made. And from there, I started to work for some companies that had a lot of real estate, including American Express and Deutsche Bank and law firms and Fidelity and JP Morgan. And so that's kind of how I got into it. Most recently, my career has really been heavily in real estate, leading real estate for American Express, for Fidelity Investments. And when I say real estate, I mean corporate real estate. So the real estate, the offices, the branches, the data centers, the call centers, the airport lounges that these companies actually own and operate for themselves.
And when we had a chance to connect, and I imagine that job entails so many things, probably things that you couldn't have imagined getting into this aspect of your career, making that transition from valuations. But I think kind of team leadership is the theme that emerged in your success, and the thing that helped you kind of focus in foundationally to accomplish all these other parts and pieces. So can you talk about finding your footing and some of the things that you learned and what helped you be successful in that?
Oh, I'd be happy to. It really is all about the team that you work with. And I've been absolutely so lucky and blessed to be able to work with some really, really great experts and working for me and for me working as supervising me. So I've really been able to learn from some really fantastic leaders, and I'll say that let's see, back at Cornell, I took a course with Ken Blanchard, who wrote some really interesting books, The 1 Minute Manager, and just really formative management leadership books. And one of the concepts there was catch people doing things right. And I really took that to heart. Read some other books all to discover your strengths. You can kind of figure out where your strengths and weaknesses are. And my goal is to really build a team that does things better than I do. And so when I may be good at certain things, but I'm not good at everything. And so I will go find people and really cultivate the skills of those individuals, particularly in areas that I don't think I'm that great at. And what happens coming out of that is that the product that the team delivers, when everyone is pushing towards doing their best, leaning into what they do best, and having that opportunity to really be creative and broaden and strengthen their skills and given a voice and given authority and responsibility, is that the product for the company ends up being really magical and very special. So that's really how I've, worked with people. And coming out of that, the innovation, the crisis management responses, look, I've led construction, facility management, operations, hospitality, transactions for many companies, and to find and build a team and give the team the microphone and the stick to make things happen. That's where the magic. It's just spectacular, the outcomes, and it's been a real privilege to be able to work with teams like that and to be able to help individuals, professionals along their way so that they can really thrive in their careers. So a couple of things that have happened when sometimes bad things happen. And you have to go into crisis management mode. And when an entire team is addressing a situation, and real estate is crazy. There are floods, there are hurricanes, there are fires. When bad things happen and a great team can really lean in to do the right thing for the facility, for the bricks and mortar, for the people, for the environment, for the community and the neighborhood. It's really, really quite amazing what can happen. And I know you and I were talking about a situation where, look, we had a crisis. It was in one of our cafeterias, and the way that the team leaned in to sort out the problem, and then the way that they implemented and we really led innovation and changes in the way that cafeteria operations happen and in the way that experiences happen in spaces led to a concept of hospitality that was really cutting edge. And this was pre-COVID. So workplace experience, hospitality, they weren't even words that were used, but I saw what my team could do. I did call a couple of professors from Cornell at the hotel school to say, I want to get this on paper. I want to put some training together. I want to put some processes together. And I really want to find out best practices from the hospitality industry that we can bring into the real estate space. And that launched hospitality and workplace experience services at American Express. And then at Fidelity Investments, we brought it in there as well. So pretty magical stuff, but it's all about the team leadership and allowing really great people to do really great things.
What a full circle moment for you to be able to call the Cornell professors
Yes.
and implement that into real life. I love that.
Yeah.
And I love something else that you said, which was catch people doing great things or doing their job well.
Yes, catch people doing things right. Yes. And calling that out and letting them know that they're doing a great job and what they did that was great, and then letting the rest of the team know that person was recognized and allowing that really public praise and shine happen. It not only is, I think, hugely motivating to be acknowledged, but it's also indicates a great role model that allows others to want to emulate as well.
100%. And I think it's such a rare perspective, but one that can really change your whole style as a leader to go into the day looking for those positive attributes, those positive contributions, the positive, moments of success versus looking for, the opposite. And I think it must change the way you feel too, must change the way you feel about your team, about what you're accomplishing, about the momentum of where you guys are able to go and the confidence in the team. I mean, it's just like anything in life, right? Having that positive outlook, looking for those moments to be grateful and those moments to have peace and a breath and just a positive overall attitude versus waking up and saying, I'm so tired, another day, right? So we have those choices, but what a powerful position to be able to implement that in your position. And I always say, especially in this podcast, that we have so much responsibility in the real estate industry, and our small actions, those small just shifts in attitude have such a ripple effect in so many lives beyond just what we can imagine in our immediate team. So I think that's really, really cool. Yeah, I'd love for you to talk about this hospitality transformation. We talked a lot about making something good out of a bad situation, and ultimately, how that played out into ultimately this bigger hospitality transformation you were able to implement at Fidelity, which is kind of how the context of how we met, and where we're at the time coming out of that. So please share.
Yeah. Just one thing, and it is pretty amazing when you try to catch people doing things right. And so we implemented at Deutsche Bank, and then I brought it over to Fidelity, and I brought it over to American Express and then Fidelity, that we would have this concept of shout outs where anybody could catch someone doing things right, let me know, and I would put it out in a newsletter. And so I don't know if people read the whole newsletter, but they certainly looked to see if their name was in bold and recognized in a shout out. And it really created this whole really group think about catching people doing things right. And it was, very simple, but very powerful. And it created really a wonderful, wonderful culture to work in. So, but hospitality definitely comes out of my hotel school days and my analyst days. And it kind of pulls together the warm and fuzzy of hospitality with the business side evaluation. And how do you do that? So we had some opportunities that we had to fix. And this happened at American Express. We did, and we fixed them. But then when you start to catch people doing things right, You're all working towards the same goals of excellence, and you're given the opportunity to actually contribute more if you would like. The innovation starts to happen, this concept of a good feeling in a space. And it doesn't cost a penny in my valuation mind to do the right thing and to have that hospitality mindset. So started to see some really magical things happening in a small area of the real estate portfolio because of this concept, because hospitality was being seeded. So we studied that. What is going on in this space? What is magical that is happening? And we actually put together a training program, a kind of service training program for corporate real estate individuals on how to work together as a team. But it wasn't just how to work together as a team. It was actually how to communicate, how to connect, how to create relations with your teammates, with your family, with your neighbors. And when you have thousands of people went through this training program, we really rolled it out around the world, and not just real estate team members, but security, special events. It was American Express team members. It was all of our service providers as well. So when you have every single person, or maybe not every single, but most of them doing something very little, very nice, when you have so many people doing that in the same way, using the same words at the same time, there is a wave of feeling that is created that our associates, our visitors noticed, and they liked it. And when they start to say, we like this, we want more of this, guess what? Then you can put together a plan for a program that does involve money and go for approvals and get your yeses. So that's what happened at American Express. It really created workplace services there. And it went into our concepts for our airport lounges, what great service means, what we look for in service providers and our trusted partners, and what we look for in new associates that we hire. Then I joined Fidelity, and Fidelity said, we want hospitality. And I joined Fidelity August of 2019. So went through my get to know Fidelity phase, hired my first hospitality person who joined the firm on March 13th, 2020, literally the day that we all left the bricks and mortar. And so we launched at Fidelity the concept of hospitality during COVID. And if you think about it, it was the most critical time to do the right thing, to make people feel good. Now, my facility management team and operations team, my transactions team, my engineering team, they were heroes doing heroic work during COVID, keeping our spaces safe and clean. But how were we able to entice those individuals that had to come in? And we had engineers that had to come in. We had operations team members. We had traders that had to come in. We had people working in the branches and our customer care associates that needed to come in. How could we possibly do that to make them feel good? Well, I'll tell you, we were able to do it really partnering with every part of the real estate team. So the space was safe. They had what they needed. They had a frictionless experience, and we were able to actually make them come in smiling and leave smiling, a warm welcome and a fond farewell. And we were able to do that with hospitality. Really interesting stuff. And then as we rolled it out during COVID, and those individuals said, this is nice, we'll come back in. That was good. That starts to get the word out about hospitality. Not many people were experiencing it, but they noticed the difference. Then when we started to have return to work and our team members, the rest of the team members started to come in, our hospitality team was there. We had already thought about what worked, what didn't work, how we could translate the concept of hospitality into the Fidelity culture. And those new joiners coming into the office and the people that were more tenured who were returning to the office noticed a difference, felt a difference. They heard the sense, they were there, they saw the smiling faces as people walked in. It wasn't a cold and Soviet-like security experience coming into the office. It was a warm welcome, there was a fond farewell, and there were surprise and delights. Big, big deal. And that really galvanized us and gave us the opportunity to just talk about hospitality, raise the concept of hospitality, get funding for hospitality. And yeah, I know we're going to talk about measurements, but the proof is in the pudding, and we were able to prove that as well.
No, that's everything being able to prove a concept is something that we talk about so much in real estate, because you have one concept could be across the whole building, let alone a whole portfolio.
Yep.
So you need to prove that concept. How do you think your idea of hospitality evolved over the course of the, starting day one of COVID, maybe even until now?
Yeah, let's see, at American Express, it was very much organic. And it really happened because of this spark of magic that was happening in our cafeterias that we decided to kind of harness and leverage across the other functions and the rest of the portfolio. At Fidelity, getting to know the culture of Fidelity and what was really going to resonate and what we could actually deliver not just once, but over and over again. And what we could deliver not just in one location, but really scale it globally. There was a lot of thought, a lot of analysis, and a lot of try and learn that went into that. So there were some things that, turned out to be spectacular, and there's some things that we just realized we couldn't scale globally. Let's see some examples. So we wanted to be able to offer snacks and to be able to deliver them in, safe ways during COVID. So individually wrapped or not individually wrapped. And what do you do with the garbage? And how do you make sure that you're still being, environmental? And so we had some try and learns with that. We also had some try and learns with creating healthy meals and healthy options across a global portfolio where some locations don't have cafes or cafeterias, and some locations are fairly remote. And so how do you deliver healthy snacks, healthy food, healthy lunches to a full broad spectrum of associates with a really egalitarian approach? So we didn't want to have kind of a hub or a mothership concept. We really want to deliver greatness to everyone. We're all in this together and we all deserve the same level. We tried vending machines, and in some locations they were great and in some locations they weren't. So we decided we tried just baskets of food, and in some locations it worked and in some locations it didn't work. What happened is some things worked to be exactly scalable and repeatable across. And in some locations, we just had to have little nuances to make the change, really delivering with the same theme and the same outcome, but the delivery methodology might have been different.
I think this is really where you come in and talk about the art of hospitality, because it is an art, but it's also a science, and that's where the measurement comes in and the measurement of success. Because I imagine that the aspect of nuance and the not one size fits all, which makes sense, can be quite daunting to somebody who is looking at the mountain that you climbed essentially by way of trial and error and then learned and reached that peak. But for somebody who's listening to this now thinking, I need to climb that mountain, that's worth it, the nuance can be daunting. But I think it's so important because especially with a global portfolio, there's no expectation that one size would fit all. How could that be the case? And I think that was a lot of what people were trying to push for in COVID, because it was a bit of a scramble, no doubt.
Yep.
So it's even more amazing to have accomplished this during that time on the back of a great experience pre-COVID, and seeing for yourself that proof in the pudding. But I'd love for you to you talked a little bit about the art, which if you'd like to talk more, we'd be happy to hear. But I'd love for you to talk about the measurement and some of what kind of helped you navigate, measuring success and essentially proving the concepts. And is it mostly just living in trial and error, which would make sense?
Yeah. It's okay. Well, first of all, I did climb Kilimanjaro, believe it or not. So it's crazy.
Did you in real life?
Yes.
Not the metaphor.
And yes,
Wow.
So now I have all of these analogies going through my head about that. But I'll tell you that, the concept of measurement is very, very important because at the end of the day, running a business and thinking about what measurements make sense to that function of hospitality, but then also how those measurements can be helped or hurt other functions as well. And so really thinking about the trickle down effect of that, and where one measurement can actually be built with a bunch of different functions coming together to create a reading of a measurement performance. So really interesting. I think some of the measurements that you can do are definitely around financials, but also about utilization. Like, are things actually consumed? And I don't just mean food, I mean services as well. Like, are they actually popular, and where are they popular, and why? And so really, looking at those kinds, so it's utilization, but it's not just utilization of space, it's actually utilization of the services and the stuff. And so, and then when you start to triangulate that, what is the effort to deliver that wonderful experience? Is it worth it? You may deliver some spectacular event, but it took a lot. And maybe it wasn't expensive, but it took a lot of people resources, and the team is tired and they can only do it once in a while. Is that a good investment? So I think right now, a lot of companies are looking at the cost and the happiness factor. But I think that concept of what is the engine that it takes to deliver this, I think a little bit more measurement needs to go into that. There's for sure trial and error, but I think understanding the culture of the organization and knowing what the goals are, understanding the goals of leadership, what is the vision for the company? What kind of strengths and vision is the leader or leadership group of the company striving for? How do they want the team to be motivated? And those all have to kind of nuance tie together. There are many different ways to deliver a wonderful experience, but to really have them link and label back to the goals of the leaders and the messages from the leaders, that provides that amplifying message that then starts to, really embed into associates and visitors' heads and minds about the wonderful things going on in this company. So I think it's not just a black and white, this was great and we got some great feedback and people were smiling and it was on budget, but it's actually broader. Does it drive business for the business? Does it drive revenue for the business? Does it drive brand recognition for the business? I think those are pretty powerful measurements that you can take into account and actually build the business case and the success value model.
And this is where it becomes to an interesting intersection between measuring the data, measuring the success, and not hindering creativity and innovation.
Yeah.
I imagine a little bit of a balancing act.
It is, but it isn't, because in all parts of leadership, and particularly leading a real estate team, that concept of try and learn, experimentation, it's got to weave into every single thing that you do, not just hospitality, because that's how excellence happens and creativity. And, when you allow teams to try and give it a go, that's the way that functions evolve and innovation happens. Because the harsh thing about hospitality is that you can do one thing and it'll be met with smiles and delight and be viewed as completely valuable. And you can do that same thing twice, and maybe there will still be some smiles and surprise and delight, but the third time, it's not going to be as exciting. It's not going to be received as well, and it's going to get a little boring. And so if hospitality does not evolve, if you do not experiment and innovate and try and learn, it's going to fail very, very quickly. Within 3 months, I would say.
Such a good point. And it's so interesting because I think pre-COVID, there was some hesitation to adopt and embrace the try and see method, which has always been necessary as long as technology has been kind of taking on this snowball effect of its rapid pace of pushing change.
Yeah.
But I think that now it's a must do. We have to try and see, not on a whole portfolio scale, right?
No.
We try small and see what happens.
That's right. Yeah.
From a global perspective, you try different markets and see what the appetite is or how it works. But it's so important, and you learn so much quicker, fail faster, right?
Yeah.
And so I do want to talk about a little bit getting into the future. And now that we have this kind of foundation for almost understanding that adaptability is necessary for success in real estate, which in commercial real estate was very hard to digest. And I imagine it's still kind of difficult for folks who have been in the industry for a long time or have a large portfolio or understand a building in a certain type of way, really embracing the bricks and mortar or the square footage. That adaptability can be challenging, but we need to be able to consider now building for adaptable spaces that can maneuver in the direction of office if they need to, or maybe adapt to more multifamily, strategy later on, or potentially somewhere in the middle with a hospitality overlay, or, they need to be able to take on the shape of whatever the function is needed at that time. And we've really seen that with so much now underutilized office space, which we had before COVID, but to an extent that we have now, you see a lot of emphasis on repurposing some of, the underutilized spaces, and not just office, and across asset classes. Constantly a need for multifamily, constantly a need for an excitement for experiences and hospitality and, a thrill of travel and experiencing something new, meeting kind people when you walk into a space. What can we how can we start to think about buildings from a resilience standpoint?
Yeah, it's so interesting. So, historically, you built a building and you fit it out, or you fit out the space inside, and you depreciated the assets for as long as you possibly could. And if you had to make changes to the space before the assets were depreciated, it was a failure because you had to write off. And so space did not get updated very often, and you'd kind of push it off. And so there wasn't a lot of change. You're absolutely right. And now, if the space is not changed very quickly, that is seen as failure. So the concept of having that flexibility up front and making changes, it has to happen. But it's really interesting that before, if you made a change, it was seen as failure. And now if you don't make a change, it's seen as failure.
There was a formula, right? Formula for success.
Yeah. Different assets have different useful lives: furniture, roofs, etc., carpet. And, the longer that you didn't have to make a change, the more money you saved, which is always a good thing. But to really find value and create longer term value, change has to happen. So I just listened to a lecture a couple of weeks ago about the concept of building a 600-year-old skyscraper and how to make a building valuable for 600 years and how to do that. And they were talking about over time, it could start out as an office building, and then it could morph into an apartment building, and then it could morph into an R&D lab, and then it could morph into a hospital. And just having that highest and best use, which goes back to my valuation days, having it be okay that highest and best use changes over time, and actually building it day one so that highest and best use could change over time and be grabbed over time. And so the factoid that is in my head now is that 3 floors of office equals 4 floors of residential. So interesting. And, and how to do that and how to think about that and how to build it day one so that the asset doesn't lose value over time. The highest and best use changes over time to keep creating that value. Super, super interesting. But I think
it makes so much sense.
But at the same time, we have a lot of real estate now, and it is bricks and mortar, and it wasn't built to be adaptable for 600 years. So taking the plunge and changing how space is used and being flexible enough to do that, and not looking at it as a failure, but looking at it as a way to create value in the future. I think that's a very, very different mindset that I'm really, the lemonade coming out of the lemons of COVID, it's something that I'm grateful for, that perspective of creating value and that change is a way to accelerate the increase in value. It's very, very powerful.
Absolutely. And speaking of change after COVID, one of the reasons that I've started this podcast and really enjoy the conversations is because health and wellness has become really part of our everyday vernacular, and it's something that's become much more of a priority. One of the many aspects of culture that is, evolving quickly, which is, sheds light on the demands of an ever evolving building. Um, what kind of opportunities do you think that's creating?
Oh
This
my
new
gosh.
introduction.
I mean, the sky's the limit. It started out, people were talking about, we want to have a spa-like experience, and, the scents and the music and, the natural light and the fresh air. All of those things are coming together now. And I love that it's really top of mind and really part of an invested conversation about getting money, about getting approvals, about getting investments to make that happen. I think it's a win-win-win. We have so much burnout and, the way that many of us are trying to keep up with computers these days, to find those situations and those environments that we can actually be productive, connect with people, and be healthy. That's really good for us. It's good for our kids. It's good for our neighbors. I think that's a very, very, very good thing right now and needed.
I would love to just finish our conversation, although I could potentially ask you questions for days. And I really do appreciate you sharing so much. I would love to, on a more personal basis, what's something that you do to take care of your own health? What's something that feeds you on a personal level?
Oh, gosh. Well, I love being with my friends and family and not just, really doing, spending time together. And that may mean cooking, chatting, doing puzzles. I love puzzles. I love reading. I love traveling. And probably the craziest thing I'm doing right now is I'm fixing up an old house. And so I'm really learning about, different kinds of foundations and different kinds of woods and really broadening my awareness of, how buildings and houses were built over time. Part of this house was built in 1928 and part of it was built in 90. So I have kind of like, the granny and the teenager living together. And
Range,
yeah,
that's cool.
it's really, really fun. An amazing puzzle to kind of save this house. Really enjoying that. It's good for me moving around and it's really good for my heart and my head.
I love that. That's beautiful. How cool. Well, I really appreciate you sharing with us. I can't wait to share this episode with the audience and get their feedback. I know that there's so many nuances to what we talked about, what we shared, Suzanne's journey and where she is now with some of her perspective, which is so interesting. And I love how open-ended we left this conversation to thought and to really thinking about what's possible. That's the best when you can do that and inspire people to think about what is possible in this industry, because there is so much opportunity, endless opportunity in every direction.
You're right. We're building this together. We really are learning from each other and helping each other, which is pretty inspiring.
It really is. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
We'll talk to you soon, Suzanne.
Thank you. Take care.